Söylesene, seni en iyi kim tanıyor? Annen? En yakın arkadaşın? Tabii ki ben. Düşünsene, her sabah gözünü açar açmaz ilk beni görüyorsun. Ben de seni. O büyük haberi verdiğinde, biliyor musun ben hamileyim dediğinde, hatta ailemiz genişlediğinde ben hep oradaydım. İşte ben buna ciddi bir ilişki derim. Ya bir gün ilişkimiz tek düze olursa? Merak etme, seni yeniliklerimle şaşırtmayı hiç bırakmayacağım. Tüm içtenliğimle. VitrA.
Sayın Hollanda Konsolosu, RIBA'nın değerli misafirleri, sevgili konuklar. VitrA'nın İngiliz Kraliyet Mimarlar Enstitüsü RIBA İşbirliği ile Eylül 2018'den bu yana düzenlediği Mimar Sohbetleri'nin 17. buluşmasına hoş geldiniz. RIBA'nın Londra'daki merkezinde gerçekleştirilen ve Birleşik Krallığın farklı şehirlerine de taşınan etkinlik kapsamında geçtiğimiz yıl Daniel Libeskind'i İstanbul'da ağırlamıştık. Bu yılki konuğumuz ise birazdan sahne alacak olan ben Berkel. Programımıza geçmeden önce cep telefonunuzu sessize almanızı rica ediyor ve acil durumlarla ilgili birkaç hatırlatma yapmak istiyoruz. Bugün Unique'de önceden planlanmış herhangi bir tatbikat bulunmuyor. Bu yüzden herhangi bir uyarı duyarsanız acil çıkış noktalarınıza gitmenizi ve görevlilerin yönlendirmelerine uymanızı rica ediyoruz. Tam donanımlı bir ambulans etkinlik süresince hazır bulunacak. İhtiyaç halinde görevlilere başvurabilirsiniz. Dikkatiniz için teşekkür ederiz. Sevgili konuklar, VitrA ile Mimar Sohbetlerinin İstanbul etkinliğine ev sahipliği yapan VitrA Marka Direktörü Cem Akkaş'ı kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Sayın Hollanda Konsolosu, değerli misafirler, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. VitrA olarak kuruluşumuzdan bu yana mimarlığı odağına alan çalışmalar yapıyoruz. Kimi zaman değerli projelere destek veriyor, kimi zaman kendi projelerimizi oluşturarak mimarlık kültürünün gelişimine katkıda bulunmaya çalışıyoruz. Yalnız ana faaliyet alanımız Türkiye'de değil, aktif olarak yer aldığımız tüm stratejik pazarlarda sektör profesyonelleriyle diyalog kurmamızı sağlayan çalışmalara önem veriyor, işbirlikleri yapıyoruz. Bunlardan en güncel olanı RIBA ile birlikte düzenlediğimiz Mimar Sohbetleri. Geçtiğimiz yıl bu programın Türkiye ayağında kalabalık bir izleyici kitlesiyle birlikte Daniel Libeskind'i İstanbul'da ağırlamıştık. Bugünkü etkinliğin kayıtlarını yaklaşık bir ay önce açtık ve sizlerle paylaştık. İlginize teşekkür ederiz. Bu değerli etkinlik dizisini oluşturduğu için Chloe Spybillow'un nezdinde tüm RIBA ailesine de teşekkür ediyoruz. Sevgili konuklar, VitrA markamızın 60 yılı aşkın geçmişi boyunca bir yandan yeni ürünler ve çözümler geliştirirken, bir yandan da aynı ufku paylaştığımız mimarlık ekosisteminin gelişimini desteklemek için hep bir adım önde olmaya çalıştık. Umuyorum bugün olduğu gibi ilerleyen dönemde de VitrA markasıyla gururla yan yana getirdiğimiz bir başka projede yeniden bir arada oluruz. Katıldığınız için hepinize çok teşekkür ederiz.
VitrA Marka Direktörü Cem Akkaş'a teşekkür ederiz. Şimdi de RIBA adına konuşmasını yapmak üzere sahneye Chloe Spybillow'u davet ediyorum. Chloe Spybillow, the stage is yours.
Hello, thank you. Welcome again. And thank you for joining us tonight for our second talk in Istanbul as part of our prestigious RIBA and VitrA talk series. My name is Chloe Spybillow, and I work at the Royal Institute of British Architects in London as the Public Programmes Manager, where I lead on delivering and curating all RIBA's public talks. The RIBA is a global professional membership body driving excellence in architecture. We serve our members and society in order to deliver better buildings and places, stronger communities, and a sustainable environment. We have over 47,000 members across the world, and nearly 6,000 of them are based outside of the UK. The RIBA is unique in being both a membership body and an accredited public museum. We have over 4 million items in our British Architectural Library, which is free and open to everyone. We use our collections to create a number of free exhibitions across the year, alongside commissioning new displays and installations by architects and designers who provide a contemporary response to our historic material. The VitrA and RIBA Talk series sits as part of this public offer to architects and society, providing a platform to hear lectures by emerging and established architects from across the world. In this slide, you can see talks delivered as part of this series so far since our last lecture here in Istanbul. These talks have been hosted across our RIBA headquarters in London and Liverpool, the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and last week at the V&A in Dundee. Since September 2018, we have had 23 speakers from 12 different countries and a combined audience of over 6,000 people. Many of our talks are also available to watch online via RIBA's YouTube channel, so I do encourage you to watch them. However, tonight, we are incredibly lucky to be hearing from Ben van Berkel, founder and principal architect at UN Studio. Ben founded UN Studio in 1988 with Caroline Boss, and together they have built the studio into a global architecture design network that specializes in architecture, interior architecture, product design, urban development, and infrastructural projects. In fact, the name UN Studio actually stands for United Networks Studio, which references the studio's commitment to collaborative practice. In 2018, Ben also founded UN Sense, a sister company of the studio set up to improve physical, mental, and social health through technological interventions within the built environment. Tonight, Ben will be showing us recently completed works by UN Studio, alongside giving us an insight into other exciting upcoming projects. So without any further delay, please welcome to the stage Ben van Berkel.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for having me here around in the city where I've not been for a while. But I can tell you that I was here when I was close to 19 years old. And in Holland we used to have a ticket you could buy as a student for maybe not more than 100 euros or 120 euros, I do believe. Well, you could travel through the whole of Europe for that little money for 1 month. And the first thing I did was to go to Istanbul. And the reason was I wanted to know everything about the work of Sinan, to know everything about the way how he was able to make the largest dome in the world, in a way, with the Hagia Sophia, etc. So I know the city a little bit. Not only through his work, but through the years I've been here regularly, luckily enough, and I'm so excited to be back again. What I do today is that I'm not going to go very deeply into all the projects in detail. What I will do is I will talk more about the themes and the topics we have been fascinated in, and I will talk about maybe some of the motivations behind the work instead of going endlessly into the depth of the work. And I have to watch my time, because I would like to talk not longer than 45, 50 minutes, and then have hopefully a dialogue with you after the talk. So is it possible to dim the light a bit in the room? And then maybe have it more on the, so that there is more light for the screen. So let me, I like a bit drama. So UN Studio and UN Sense, what it is. With UN Studio, you might know that as what already was said in the introduction, it's a United Network organization. We believe in collaborative work. When Caroline and I set up the company, we believed that it was important that the role of the architect was not anymore to stand in front of the orchestra and say, well, here's the sketch, you just have to translate my sketch into a design, and then after a preliminary design and a definite design, then we invite a specialist. No, we believe that from the beginning, and this was already in the 90s, we believe that in the beginning of a process you need to have all your specialists around you and network with these specialists and walk through the orchestra like a kind of John Cage and touch on the players in the orchestra and let them play within the system of the composition he was then composing. And similarly we did that in already the earlier times with UN Studio, and now that is expanded with many other departments in UN Studio than only that we produce architecture. We have even futurists in our studio who can think with us about the future of mobility, the future of living, the future of work and working, etc. And UN Sense is a recent company, as explained before. It's introducing new technologies in the built environment, not to check how people are operating and how we can become a bit more efficient in the city alone. That's not our goal. It's not the smart city approach where we are after, but we really believe that we should go, I don't want to say beyond the smart city concept, but to give it a bit more clearer direction in how it can be used. And we concentrate on health, but also on topics around sustainability, community building specifically, so that we use technology to promote the analog aspects of the way how the city can be improved, for instance. But I will be clearer about that later at the end of the lecture. So we always believed in the idea that architecture connects, of course, people, brings people together. Architecture in itself and the quality of the way how we construct it and how we design is important, as you all know, and it is essential that we think about the aesthetics and the cultural qualities and the effects of architecture itself. But without architecture, and particularly without people, there is no architecture, you could say. So here you see the DNA and the quality of the way how our work developed from the earlier times of the 90s, where we built and designed a bridge for Rotterdam, the Erasmus Bridge, and over the years from the station, train station in Arnhem, the Mercedes-Benz Museum, and now lately the larger scale projects we do over many locations in the world. But the principle is that we want to improve ourselves and constantly like to stay in dialogue about the profession and the way how, as an architect, you can expand yourself in the role of an architect. And I've been always interested in that. For that reason, I love to always teach. I'd like to pull a mirror to what we can do as architects in order to improve not only the profession, but particularly in the way how we work, and can keep on innovating within the field. Our agenda, I would say, for the role of the architect today has never been so clear as today, in the sense of think about climate change, everything to do with the discussions about circularity, mobility, and particularly lately technology. And I've always joked over the last years, especially when we talked about UN Sense, that today, if we think about that we all are in the iPhone phase, I do believe that somehow our industry or our field is still in the Walkman phase. We are a bit behind. We need to improve the quality in the way how we can implement technology in the built environment, and I will again explain that later. But we believe also that from the history of making iconographic places, like places we wanted to brand, we now are, luckily enough, going for that reason. As I said, that the brief is so clear for the architect, we are now going to a direction where we can make much more meaningful places than ever before. In the sense, we can give them much more purpose and direction, particularly when it comes down to the topics of sustainability and community building as I explained. So it's a form of relevance, what is today so exciting about the role of the architect. And of course, architects have always been interested in health, for instance, in giving architecture a relevance. But the urgency today is quite powerful and very needed. The urgency to change things in the built environment are quite under pressure, I would say. Talking about the earlier years that I was traveling, and quite, I don't know what it was, but I had this kind of urge to go to many places and wanted to see always whatever I could find in the history of modern history of architecture. And for instance, I was when I was still not yet an architect, I was working during the day for a graphic designer and interior architect, Shigeru Watano, and also Ko Liang-yi in the late 70s, beginning of the 80s. And especially Shigeru Watano, a Japanese architect, said to me, "Ben, you're talking the whole day about architecture. Here we do other things. Why don't you do some traveling, not only in Europe, but I give you a small budget, and I hope your parents give another budget, and just go to Japan for maybe only for 3 weeks, and I will guide you and direct you where to go." And one of the things he said was to visit the Katsura Palace. I don't know if you have ever seen the Katsura Palace in Kyoto, but it is one of the most amazing palaces you can visit in Japan. It's also the place where Bruno Taut, as you know, Bruno Taut was here also in Istanbul. But when he went to Japan and saw this palace, he said, modernism was invented in Japan in already the 17th century. And you can see it. I mean, it's as if you step in a Mondrian painting. It's beautiful. The whole relationship between the indoor space, the outdoor space, what the Japanese call the space of Ma, is almost one. And particularly how it is integrated with nature is quite a beautiful experience to when you visit this place. Actually, on the spot in this palace, I decided to become an architect. So I hope it will change your mind too. Maybe you're already an architect, but if you're not an architect, just go to this palace. Another aspect what I learned during that visit was the quality of the rituals introduced in the 17th century, introduced in the time of how this palace was used. And that was another aspect what gave me a lot of stimulants and ideas in a way how one have to look to architecture. So the relevance of the ritual, I would like to say. And for that reason, I've always looked at the way how a house or a building needs to be organized in a relationship with time. As you know, I mean, a ritual is related to time. And I often call it clockwise planning, or clockwise thinking of the way how one uses a place in the morning or the afternoon or the evening. This is the Möbius house, one of my earlier buildings, even built in the time before the Erasmus Bridge. It is a house where two materials constantly cross each other, like in the Möbius structure. So the concrete goes from the inside to the outside, and the glass goes from the outside to the inside. You can see that here, the glass between the living room and the stair going upstairs moves in the house and becomes a wall and a door further down at the dining room. Actually, the family of this house is still living in the same organization now for the last more than 20 years. And nothing has changed. They love the house so much. They constantly tell me whenever I visit the house, because I, of course, with many clients and friends, I can luckily enough still visit the house. They tell me that every day for them the house is a different experience. In the year particularly, because the light changes within the organization of the day, etc. There is a nice funny story to be related to this glass wall between the stairs and the living room, and that is that they asked me, could you think of a model, because I talked to the kids of the family, of course, and I talked to the family when we designed the house, but the family said, could you find a way that we don't hear our children when they come late home, but let's make sure that we see them. And it worked for many years. And here you see the plan of the Katsura and the Möbis, and you see the major difference. It's not so that but what I picked up is this idea of the calmness of the Möbis house. This calmness when you step into the Katsura Palace is spectacular, spiritual, I would almost like to say. It's so powerful that I studied many times the length and the height of the spaces and the geometry. And I discovered that it had also to do with movement of the rituals, that while you moved through the space, that you could create a form of calmness in a space by repeating certain geometrical elements. And I repeated that also in the Möbis house, like for instance, every volume, you can't see it so here in detail, is having different angles. So 7 degrees, the 9 degrees, and the 11 degrees, these are the 3 angles who are repeated in different places within the volumes of the design of the house. So if you walk through the house, it's almost as you don't see it in the first place, and you experience it only over the time, that you discover then that there is a form of calmness to be found by the way how these different angles and volumes work together in this geometry. So my belief is that it is not so much the static space what gives you a kind of calmness, but the way how you move through the space. And of course, as you can see in this image, the idea of working, living, and actually the client was quite visionary in that time. They believed already that in the future one would work at home. So we're talking about the mid of the 90s, and he and she, they wanted to have their own. He had his own working space in this place, and she had her working space in that space. And the sleeping room is on the lower part. But the idea was that living, sleeping, and working were all combined in this ritual of moving through the house. And it was connected, of course, to the way how the sun and the views towards the landscape were integrated in this. But for years, I studied them always through the houses and maybe the pavilions and the invitations for the binales. You have them in South America and Sao Paulo, but also, of course, in Venice. We tested then new ideas about this idea of the home. What is the home? Could be the holiday home, for instance, brought home. Could we bring the idea of this escapism, to be outside, to escape into a place where you'd like to be, to the condition of the way how we can bring that home. And these were ideas brought into this pavilion we designed for an exhibition in America. And you can still see that I don't only use the computer and artificial intelligence while we design today, but of course I still sketch. Talking about rituals and movement, mobility has been always, next to the topics I described, has been my interest. And lately I discovered a very interesting new public transport system. And you might have used the cable car system for ski holidays. It's quite scary sometimes, I find. But what I didn't know, that you could use a cable car system for a public transport system. And the reason is simply that in an hour you could move, this is Amsterdam, a cable car system we are proposing for Amsterdam right now, where the city is very serious about. We are going into an early design phase with this project. You can move 5,000 people from one place to the other. Every other minute for or 4 minutes, sorry, you can have a cable or a car, a cabin of 36 people coming into this car, and you can take even your bike into this. You have not so much waiting time for that reason, and it's quite a constant, fantastic, positive system. It's quick, as I say here, sustainable. It's incredible economic if you compare it with any design of a bridge. It's reliable, and it's unusually comfortable if you are not having height fear. The project is introduced in the area on the east side of the center of Amsterdam. It's going to be connected to an NDSM marina area where a lot of new developments are happening, connecting itself towards the future link towards the Sloterdijk area. There's a station where from there you can go to the Schiphol, the airport. And this whole new neighborhood where close to 40,000 new houses are going to be built. And the reason why the city is enthusiastic about it, because there is still a lot of discussion going on about bridges on the east side of Amsterdam, in the middle of Amsterdam, connecting its central station area towards the north. The north used to be quite isolated, but now it is a very popular new area where a lot of people like to live, and with this new cable car system, the city believes that it can stimulate people not to go all the way to the new metro line, but to go from the east side of North Amsterdam towards the other infrastructural areas. And of course the other way around, people who work or live here can also work, for instance, in North, etc., and move with the cable car system to the north. I said 36, but it is 32, sorry. And the stations could be really fantastic places where people can step over from one infrastructural node to the other, but it can be also a station with all the infrastructure and facilities and programs we know from any other station, with even a more modern edge related towards it, to introduce more programs around the workspaces and qualities of even more program around the train station, in order to make sure that the station becomes a lively area also in the night, so that people don't feel unsafe. This is the station for the north side, what connects itself to, again, all the other infrastructural hubs. And you know, we have in Amsterdam a lot of bikes, so for each station we have a huge parking bike planned in that area. The reason why we came to this idea was a project we were initially starting with in Gothenburg, where even the city owners of Gothenburg in Sweden decided that this would be for them the most advanced infrastructural system to be used between, again, the south part of Gothenburg and the north side, because there you have the factories for Volvo. Nobody is actually at the moment so happy about the way how the connection between the north and the south part of the city is working. Again, here this cable car system was voted and a true political system and elected for that reasons to be introduced in that city. And this is the way how we work. We often look at different scales, of course with the engineers, make sure that the pylons have a particular reference towards the history and the robustness of the city, like the cranes in the harbor, and the way how it fits in the city, we thought is very important. And in this competition, we wanted, mainly because of the design and the historical quality of the references we came up with, but also the engineering of the design. And this is maybe another fascination I have, to make sure that through the engineering of the design, that you test the possibilities and the scope and the span of the way how you can push the limits and change the boundaries of the known in engineering and design. Similarly here, the stations are essential. They're quite new. They, of course, because of their specific function, you can give them a new type of character. And again, here, a lot of other added functions are connected towards these stations. Here we work with wood, wooden ceilings and walls to make sure that the combination between wood and concrete makes also the project partly quite circular. So building connections for the future are for us important because sustainable mobility projects are, we believe, the future. This system we had designed for the Hyperloop is maybe one system, but and it's cheap and it's you can apply it, you can build it almost tomorrow. It is very effective, as I explained. But where we lately have worked on is a new type of project you might have heard of. It's the Hyperloop project, where there is a lot of discussion about if this is the new way we can transport ourselves with a new approach whereby we can conquer in a new way flying in the world. And it's an, yeah, you know it, it's a tube system whereby through vacuum system you can speed up a train support whereby you can, yeah, almost from the distance from Schiphol be as quick at the Frankfurt airport station in the same time as you would fly. And European hyper network system is more or less this, what you can see here. It's a serious project where at the moment a lot of investments are introduced for. There is a Dutch company or consortium, I have to better say, right now who are so far that they will start with a test tube to be built in the north of Holland in a few months' time, whereby this can all be tested and proved that this can work. In America this is already done, but one wants to have, for particularly the European system, a special test in order to make sure that the Hyperloop is going to, in all its risk, be operating. And then for that, stations are going to be very important. They're going to be, in our opinion, much more places where you can connect yourself towards a hub, a transport hub, you can better say, with all kinds of activities related towards it, where landscape, working, shopping, everything we have learned from airports can be expanded, and it can be a place where new forms of interaction and knowledge centers could be connected to this new system, as you can see it here, from health services to on-demand workspaces, parks and recreation areas. Let's say if you have to wait longer than 4 or 5 hours for a train to come, then you can all do this in this neighborhood, or maybe work there, as I explained. Even we were involved in the design of the trains itself, and that lately pulls us in a whole new field. We lately are now, for many other companies, thinking about interiors for airplanes, wayfinding, even the costumes for the stewards in the planes, etc. So connecting people and places is actually where maybe one talks about when one talks about infrastructure. But it is also very important to work on this new form of identity where I talked about. And sometimes I call it the oppositional of the technological. And I mean by that the cultural effects one needs to give to a design. It's what we know from art, that good art is a quality where you'd like to come back to, you'd like to experience it again, you'd like to study it. And this quality of the many layers of a project is for us very important. And particularly in the design, the earlier design of the Erasmus Bridge, this was the key of the way how we came to the form of the bridge, the way how the bridge pulls the north part to the south. So it's all to do with the way how the south part of Rotterdam, in this case, could be as important as the north side. And playing with this idea, I mean, when we passed two of the bridges we know from Istanbul here, I explained the decks are so beautifully thin. We wanted to have a very nice slender bridge related to a pylon, what again would play a little bit with the industrial power of the history of Rotterdam. And over the years, this bridge became so important for the owners of the city. I will explain that later. And I can honestly say I never expected that a project like this can become such an important symbol. But for that reason, talking about branding and giving new identities to projects, I can honestly tell you, you cannot design an iconic building or bridge. Iconic projects grow over time, and it's what you give to the project. It's the reading of the location, it's the reinterpretation of the location into that what you translate to a possible new object. All these things make it a project what can maybe possibly stand out. But that's why I call it lately today more the meaning you give to projects and spaces. Nobody probably knows what this is, but this was the first computer I worked on. It's quite interesting to pull the slides up all the time for myself even, because you can see the funny coffee cups I was drinking from, and the thick books I was still reading in order to understand AutoCAD. But I'm talking here about the mid-90s, so 94, even 93. And the interesting thing here is that we had a specialist in the office who was so good in making 3D models already in that time. We had an AutoCAD program, but we learned that the builder had a laser machine, and in that time that was also quite unusual, who could work with a computer, who could cut the steel work with a computer. So we prepared all the steel work with this computer and made 2D cuts of the pylon and elements of the bridge, and transported them to the contractor, and they would then cut the steel from there. But it was quite amazing in that time already to work on these things. And then what is quite amazing is that I've learned that if you are open towards the stimulation of innovation, then you can also motivate the other specialists, but also particularly the builders, to be innovative as well. And what was quite interesting here in 1995, when we were ready to build the bridge, the contractor said that he had a very good idea, but he would not tell us yet what it was, because he had a super good price for the bridge. The city was unbelievably happy because the bridge was quite expensive, and we had a lot of political discussion about the bridge in Holland. How is it possible that the bridge is so expensive, etc.? And then this contractor was able to, and that was pity enough never published, but he came with a price what was actually almost 20 million lower than everyone was so angry about. But it was this crane. He had this crane standing somewhere in the Chinese Sea, and from the Chinese Sea, this crane, it's an offshore building, as you can see, Hirma. The crane was coming to Amsterdam and lifted this total pylon of 150 meters high onto its horizontal deck in a few hours. So it was done in 5 hours. And then when it was standing on its deck, and this was done in the end of the harbor, then it was shipped to its location in the same day. So, I mean, you cannot believe it. I think that close to 20,000 people watched this event, especially the people of Rotterdam, of course. And maybe that worked also on the image making of the bridge, but it was quite beautiful how this builder was able to do this fantastic construction work. And you have to imagine that the bridge was there in the earlier times quite alone. You can see it. I mean, there was almost nothing built there. This is how it looked like in the 50s. And you can see now that it is at the moment quite a new area. And really the bridge helped to develop this whole neighborhood. And this is what one needs to know, that if you want to expand and improve parts of the city, especially large areas where more than maybe 500, 6,000 or 10,000 units are produced, then you have to be aware that that will produce 30% of more movement of infrastructure coming to the location. And that is what this bridge did so well, that it actually proved that it could generate an enormous amount of positive influence towards the south of Rotterdam. It took a while to develop this, but now the most exciting thing is that the more difficult area of Rotterdam is this part, where we are also involved in, and that is going to be also having a renovation over the next couple of years. And this is actually what happened after several years. Many people were so excited about this bridge. I didn't do it myself. I don't want to undress myself. But actually what is quite interesting is when we had an opening of the exhibition of the 20 years existence of the bridge a few years ago, this guy, a sailor from Rotterdam, he told me, yeah, the reason why I did this is simply because every Friday when I come home from sea, then this bridge welcomes me and brings me home. So, I mean, it's really, honestly, with slightly light tears in his eyes, he was telling me, this bridge means for me a lot because I'm safe home. So it was quite a nice story. And I tell you, not only the tattoos who have been placed on many bodies, I discovered during the openings night of that exhibition, because I mean everyone was tilting his arm and telling everything about their own personal stories. But the bridge became the bridge of people, and that's I thought was so exciting. That over the years, that it is not anymore your project. It is not something what belongs to you, but it is a project what is embraced by the emotions of people itself. And I think I would say that's the beauty of architecture. So connecting people is one of the ambitions we have always believed in, and to build up meaningful networks. And through all these infrastructure projects we have done, we became known to do infrastructure projects in a new and a totally unexpected, advanced manner. Like over the last years, we have been working very hard on a new network for Doha, a metro station network. And you cannot believe it. We started 8 years ago or 7 years ago with this project, with only the sketches. And the first 2 metro lines are already built with close to, I think now around 12 stations in Doha. So the speed and the unbelievable pressure on this project was extremely high. And why? Simply because the city or the state wants to finish this metro network, of course, for 2022, when the World Cup is going to be there. And of course, they need it really also for the development of the city. The place is growing like unbelievable. So we studied the city endlessly. We worked on many different ways of looking at what could the station identities mean in this environment with this culture. what could we do to the network identity in the different 4 lines? How could we give them new kind of recognition? With the 33 stations, you have to imagine, in 2022, all the 4 metro lines are finished, and then we have 33 stations to be finished. And there. But what we did was to come up with a system, a morphological system, with elements who could be used within the system in many different ways. So you have, you can, maybe to explain it simply, so you have around 24 different elements, and with these 24 different elements you can make almost, I would like to say, more than a few thousand variants. And we didn't have to, luckily enough, have a few thousand stations, but you could do that. And the reason was simply because we have an underground station, we have an upperground station, we have cross stations, etc. So this was the manual we designed. So this was a whole new way of thinking of how you can systematize a design but still could have its own identity. And then over the manual, as we called it, one could work on the manual and engineer it and work through the manual with the different contractors. Because in this project, you cannot imagine, we had close to 24 different contractors working on this project, 7 different types of engineers for the different stations, etc. It was a whole huge operation to get this all done. From wayfinding to what's the tiling and everything around it. And through the years, we of course could always test the different qualities of the materials. But what was the most amazing is that the client was interested also here to come up with a one-to-one mock-up. This is not a one-to-one, but you can see it here. This is only a detail. Or you can see it there. And the mock-up is actually a one-to-one station. So we built half a station with a mirror at the end so that you could see the effect of the whole space. And from this mock-up, this one-to-one mock-up, we were able, with all the contractors and the people who worked on the project, we could bring them to this place, and then everyone could refer to it and could see how things were detailed, etc. So another aspect is, of course, talking about infrastructure networks, is the quality of the framing of spaces and the claim on space in our cities today. And we believe that it is so important to think of new forms of density, new forms of ways of how you can make integral designs in such a way that they are so designed that they generate an extra quality for the city. And as we know, this is the data from the UN. Urban densities were quite on its way, so in the 1950s, but if we think about 2050, with the amount of growth we have in the world, in these areas, the red colored areas, we will have cities who will be all more densified. And of course, not everything will be densified in the cities, as we know, but of course, cities still attract a major public. So when we used, for the first time, new forms of techniques, testing, and I could call it maybe, and this is in 1997, you could see this was a study for New York, when we tested the first kind of, call it artificial intelligent systems in order to study movements and data within the city with how they would generate cross effects in a location was in that time quite, again, a new way of looking at the city. For instance, when we showed our images of data towards the infrastructural engineers in the city, they couldn't believe that were their data, because they had never seen it. They didn't see the quality of their own particular written research in visualization. They were shocked about some of the information I will tell you. And the reason why I explain this is simply because we were using a lot of techniques, as we know now, BIM, in architectural design, building information technology. That's all about the production of architecture, but I believe that also technology can be used in order to analyze the location and to improve it through the way how we look at information and the performance, maybe I better say, the performance of a location and a building or a city. I'm not going to explain this all in detail, but in that time we were studying for the first time the way how people would come to a location. Like we would look at the residents, we would look at the tourists, we looked at the way how people who work in the city would come to a location, and then we looked at the accessibility of the location, but particularly the way how public spaces were used, and the most important, how it was, how these different user groups were using a location in time. And that gave me a whole new insight, as I explained in the beginning of the lecture, that rituals and movement can be studied in the way how they are cross-combining each other in a location. So with this system, we learned that, for instance, and I'm talking about the early 90s, that for instance, the Penn Station in New York, in comparison to the Grand Central Station, was having not enough program around itself, whereby we could then understand that everyone was talking about such an unsafe space around the station, because whenever you came out of the Madison Square Garden, was the argument, the theater, that then people felt that they didn't want to walk around that area because it was unsafe. And luckily enough, that is now changing. But the Grand Central, as you can see in this diagram, is having a huge amount of program around it and a lot of liveliness around the location. So this idea of liveliness and the right combination of program was giving us a total new insight in the way how one can start to rethink design strategies. And we used this for a train station in Arnhem, where we looked at the play between people coming from a local bus to a regional bus, how many people moved from the train station towards the city. It gave us a whole new idea about that we could go away from a traditional train station, but that maybe one can start to think of a new kind of form of transfer hub, like I explained with the Hyperloop, into a new development of a place where people can wait, and where two bus stations are combined with a train station, and bicycle parking and parking, all to be placed in one area. And for that reason, we also introduced a new construction system in the section of the project, because you know a column system of parking and a bus station cannot be combined. So we came with this whole new system, and this is the result. This roof was not finished when I photographed this project with our photographer, but you can see this is the entrance of the station, the platforms connecting themselves to its new program around the site, and that generated an enormous, generous, and very, luckily enough, lively station. And we applied these systems of planning to many locations, like this is the Raffles City in a project in Hangzhou, connecting itself underground to two major train stations, with a lot of program, a lively program on the location itself, on the first 7 floors, and from the mixed use of hotels, residents, affordable housing even, is all to be combined in almost a kind of small city in this location. And this is what the city of Hangzhou wanted. They said that it is important to densify the location to make sure that people are stimulated to use public transport. And this is, I think, the essence of working with stations, that you make sure that people don't use the car, but that they are that people are stimulated to use public transport. And similarly, we use that for a project in Frankfurt. Sorry, I'm going a bit faster here. Whereby the mixed use of programs were introduced here also in a plinth. This is a project under construction right now, as you can see, close to the central bank area. Actually, the whole area of this quite impressive, beautiful project, site. I hope it's going to be an interesting project for you. But the site was closed off for close to 40 years. And now will become a new part of the lively part of the city center, hopefully in the future. And as I said, these clockwise planning strategies help us a lot with rethinking the city. This was a competition we won in Melbourne, whereby actually the plinth plays the most important role to bring people towards a lively, active, green part of the city, as we argue. And the project is going to be incredible, sustainable, in a new way sustainable, with ideas around circularity, all to becoming a part of this project, because the client is quite ambitious on this level to introduce that in this project. But let me finish, because I like to have a dialogue with you too. Let me finish with this latest project we are doing in Holland. It's again the story of how we can... Oh, sorry, this is not... I skipped this quickly. We know the Mercedes-Benz Museum. This is the project we are doing right now in Helmond. And the interesting part of this project is that it is actually a small project in the south of Holland, but incredible advanced and innovative by the way how the politicians wanted to develop this project. And in the beginning, when people said to me, are you interested in doing a project in Helmond? Where is Helmond? Everyone asked me. And then I said, yeah, Helmond is actually, I knew that by chance, luckily enough. It's in the most important technological development of the part. It's a kind of Silicon Valley of Holland, I said, because it's close to Eindhoven. You have Philips there. You have many startups in that neighborhood. A lot of other companies like Tesla are part of this area. And people there want to live in a totally different way. The whole generation of people who want to live more responsible are screaming for new neighborhoods and new forms of housing. So that was actually what the politician told me of Helmond. And what is interesting is that it is related to a Brainport smart district idea, and that means that you have a consortium of investors connected to the city, or every city you can imagine, and there are funds to be related to this in order to stimulate innovation with particularly a social impact. And you know, that gave us an enormous advantage to have this subsidy and this money, and of course with the investors we work with, to make this a community of innovations. What we did was to follow the quality of the system of the agricultural geometry of the location into a way of how with that we separated the zones for development, but with, luckily enough, an enormous amount of green areas around it, and particularly in the middle part of this neighborhood. We have close to 1,500 housing units. It is a 150 hectare site, and I mean, you have to imagine here it is also stimulated that some workspaces will be introduced, but here particularly when we talked with potential neighbors or people or commuters and people who want to come and live here, we discussed the idea that that every commercial project and workspace what one needs to introduce in this neighborhood needs to come out of the system itself. So we don't allow any big supermarket to come to the location, etc. And the way how we do that is by stimulating with the production of food, for instance, that people here can also sell food. But let me explain a bit more about the project. So you have living, working, and sharing spaces within the in the community, public green spaces, but also not only urban green, but also places for the production of food, as I explained. And the idea is that with the gardens introduced around the houses, you don't have here then your own garden. You have shared commons, as we know from the English landscape or garden projects. You can have your own garden if you want, but actually you can also stimulate here the people who are going to live here to be part of the community and then have shared gardens with playgrounds, public spaces where you can just have your own moment within the garden, but also particularly stimulating also people here to produce your own food. But the most important is that we here with data, with an urban data platform, are working quite intensely on a development whereby we can test if energy is really performing in the right manner, and we allow developers to come into the project to develop plots whereby they can come with ideas where they can even with battery systems or new forms of energy systems, they can produce energy if they want, because we have had already these investors in the project, or use new forms of cross-combined energy systems. The same to be said about water. Water can be used in such a way that we, particularly in the total planning of this project, that we reuse all the water. And as you know, in the north part of Europe, it rained endlessly over the last 2 months. We produce so much water that we don't know even what to do with the water, and reusing it is something we can introduce much more in our built environment. But here we're going to not allow to bring water in from outside the system itself. And the food production is quite well set up with a group of interesting specialists who with us worked on the fact that we can produce close to I think 30% or up to 60% the production of food within the regional area and the local area within the neighborhood itself. So and new forms of mobility are introduced, as you can see here. So you cannot park your car if you pass or you come out of the train, this is the train station. Then you can only use electric pods, as we call them, and then move to the neighborhood, and you're not allowed to use a car within this neighborhood. Also, of course, within the whole discussion we have about the Paris agreement, we want to be totally energy neutral, as we said, but also don't produce any CO2 in this quite ambitious project. And what the most important is in this project, and you can see here is Humboldt, it's close to Eindhoven, is that we developed this data platform. But you have to imagine, and this took a long time to set this up, that this data platform is not connected to the larger companies as we know them. It's especially with cyber specialists, it's so set it up that it is with blockchaining, be used only by the owner. So if someone here sets up a platform whereby one can share information about who's responsible for the garden, the production of food, or medical topics in this neighborhood, then the information is kept within the neighborhood itself or with the owners who use these data. So you have your data connected to your own identity instead of the identity of the companies who are often are related to this. And of course, what is the most important here, when we designed this project in the earlier phases, we always kept on talking to potential residents. And we still do that, because the type of residents are growing and the interest is growing. But we want to make sure that this is a project for everyone. And for that reason, totally inclusive and gives a good cross-section of our society in Holland. So what is the essence of this project is that it is an experimental project. It's new. It's going to be, as we know from any form of startup, that this is going to be a project what we set up by doing it. We learn through the process and correct ourselves while we are actively working on the project. And this is actually, I mean, honestly, in the process we designed this, so unusual in that what we have learned. So maybe 30 years ago, when we started the practice of UN Studio, through UN Sense, that I've discovered that community building can be exciting there when you make use of every form of innovation you can imagine. And it's not only technology, because we use technology here for the good things, for topics around sustainability, as I said, energy transition, but particularly community building, so that people don't get so much obsessed with the technology and sit the whole day at home and feel isolated in a neighborhood. We know that living in a tower, for instance, if you are living on the 50th floor and you don't see any moment your neighbor, then you feel lost in your apartment. And that's why we believe that we also can produce these ideas into skyscrapers, that you can make neighborhoods in the skies, and that you can think of new forms of integral amenities where people can meet each other, and that you are stimulated to meet each other in order to make sure that you feel that you're part of community. So it is a project whereby learning by doing is the essence. And people love this image often, because when I explain it, people like it here when it rains in Holland. Especially in this neighborhood, they love it. They love it when it rains here, because they know that all this water is going to be reused. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben, for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So please remain on stage for the Q&A session. Değerli konuklar, Ben Van Berkel'e sunumu için teşekkür ederek soru-cevap bölümüne geçiyoruz. Lütfen sorunuzu sormak için size söz verildiğinde görevli arkadaşlarımızın mikrofonu getirmesini bekleyin. Aksi takdirde sesiniz tercümanımıza ulaşmayacak ve konuğumuz sorunuzun İngilizcesini dinleyemeyecek. Şu anda arkada görüyorum ama you wanna go first? Buyurun.
Hoş geldiniz diyeyim önce. Kendisine şunu sormak istiyorum. Tasarım yaparken, yani tasarlarken, binalar olsun, çevreyi olsun, ilham olarak yani nelerden faydalanıyor? Yani mesela bazı mimarlar bitki türlerinden, bazıları işte meyve türlerinden, bazıları işte çevresinde gördüğü kuşlardan, böceklerden yani sayamayacağımız kadar varlıklardan ilham alıyor. Kendisi bu konuda nedir, düşüncesi nedir? Ben de mimar olarak soruyorum kendisine. Teşekkür ederim.
Teşekkürler.
Yeah, so I hope that everyone understood it, huh?
Yeah. It was in Turkish, so it was so clear.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I of course I never talk about my deep secrets. I never give them away. So I often tell that I'm interested in technology and cultural effects, but then I don't give the details. But I can tell you honestly that it changes almost every half year. I might have a period that I'm reading topics around things happening in science. Or, for instance, last year, one of my favorite scientists was Alexander von Humboldt. I don't know if you know this scientist because he's in a way almost forgotten. I think it was an 18th century, it was the 18th century, everyone knows this, 18th century, I think, scientist in Germany. He was the first one to discover in the world how our total ecosystem operates. And that was unbelievable. I forgot now the name of the title of the book, but it is written by a fantastic... pardon?
Andrea Woods.
Yeah, Andreas Wolfs, huh? Yeah, the New York, she is a journalist writing different biographies, but this biography is her most successful one, and it's a book like this, but give it in 5 weeks during a break you have, you can read this book. But anyway, this book you have to read because he was the first one to understand how our ecosystem operates. He traveled to many locations in the world. He advised many presidents in his time to learn everything about how to use new forms of agriculture. He was actually our first maybe sustainable thinker in very early times. And he was actually going to the Amazons and having the most dangerous trips to find, the little plants he had heard of and couldn't find, or he knew everything about birds, everything of nature. And a great scientist I followed since then. But so, like I said, maybe lately I've been highly interested in women artists. And the reason I say women artists, because I discover more and more how much influence not only Caroline had on me, but particularly women artists had on men artists over the history of the art history, I have to better say. And this is another book I give you away of my secrets. It's a book called 9th Street, Women. It's a book written about the quality of the abstract expressionist painters of the 1950s, 60s in New York. Actually, abstract expressionism was in the earlier days in America was a total new invention. Like Pollock and Willem de Kooning, they would go against Picasso. They really believed that in America they could as much invent as one did in Europe. And what I discovered, that someone like Helen Frankenthaler, or a woman called, she slips now my mind. A similar other woman artists connected in this group, they influenced so much the men painters of that time. Like Helen Frankenthaler was the first color field painter. She used to work like Pollock a little bit, but she came up with whole new ways of using paint on a canvas. whereby later artists like Mark Rothko, would use the same technique as she actually invented. But in this book, becomes very clear how important it was in the 50s that these women artists had so much influence on men artists. So anyway, and I can go on, you know, from astronomy to astrology, towards funny interest in birds. Yeah, I've interest in birds too, like you said. But not you know, you might not think, you might think, oh God, he's a bird watcher, but you know, I go really into it, yeah? That's my thing. I go into a study for almost a year into a scientist or a particular topic, and then I really learn everything out of it, yeah.
Thank you then. Başka soru var mı? Mikrofon oraya yakınsa önce orayı alalım.
Hi. I don't know if you can hear me. This is İpek Baycan from Slash Architects. What we
Where
know,
are you?
I am here.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. And so far, like we know from your prior projects, you have been quite interested in motion, and you have got a lot of inspiration, let's say, through the analysis of motion of human interaction, or sometimes with the cars, like in the Mercedes-Benz. And I would like to ask if this UN sense you have started thinking about has also some ideas that you have gathered throughout all these studies you have made so far? Or when you look at your prior works and recent works, do you see a difference, or do you see the fundamental spine being connected? This is what I would like to ask.
Yeah, no, I mean, hopefully that became a bit clear in the way how I tried to, in the beginning, try to explain that I've been always interested in rituals and the human-centric approach towards architecture, maybe better to say. And like I said, with human sense, what I find interesting is that that, for instance, we might work today with a lot of senses, for instance. But I think that when we are not using particular functions anymore in our environment, then we might develop new forms of senses, you know, new kind of type of experiences. And I've really even read that if you, over the time, when we used in the household certain crazy things like the washing machine, and in the last century, the 50s, it was an idea that then, particularly for women, again, sorry, it was then an advanced tool, and then they would have more time in the household, etc. This is what technology does to our lives, and sometimes it's positive, and sometimes negative. And I look really seriously also to the negative effects of technology, in order to make sure that when we use technology, that we use it in the best manner towards human-centric design. So that's maybe the spine through the work. Yeah.
Okay. So we have a question from here.
Hello, my name is Ali. I'm an architect as well. I think it will be kind of close to what Ipek just asked about. I think it might be a bit personal, but it's also personal for me because, like, in my college days, your work and your office was quite an inspiration, something to quite follow and find examples in. I just want to ask, and I'm quite happy to see in your, like, the lining of the presentation, you went back to mid-90s and early 2000s and like shown images, which I think still are the, most impressive ones, still, like the early 3D models and diagrams, etc. What I want to ask is that I think it's a question just for you, but maybe for all of us and for everything that goes bigger and further. And I believe, I'm sure that by going into other cities, cultures, even different scales, different programs, etc. The more you grow bigger, you definitely gain new things. But like as a kind of as a reflection, do you think, in terms of at least just like in the way that the office works, do you think you lose things or you miss things. I don't know. That's why why in the beginning I said it might be personal, but it's about the growth and the kind of loss comes with it. Do you think you lose things as well?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
Yes. No. Yes. Yes. Of course you. Like for instance, I was always drawing and painting. I've never been so public about my paintings, but I have a friend, artist, collector, and a very young, very powerful friend who says to me, "Ben, you're crazy that you always separate your paintings from architecture, and that why are you so secretive about it?" Because you cannot believe it, in my holiday home, what is my home sometimes, and the other way around, you can find a lot of work I've never published or showed to anyone. But I had also a period where I didn't paint. So I had up to 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I had a period for close to 8 years that I didn't paint at all. And since I set it up UNSense, funny enough, and set it up the ideas, I rented a huge, nice atelier and I started to paint again. And what I'm trying to say with that is that's maybe what I mean about cultural quality of cultural effects. I do believe that you have to stay very close to cultural effects. And what I mean by that, for instance, if it is for you art, or if it is for you movie making or reading a beautiful book, but the power of emotions you can get through powerful artworks is so important to keep on working on, next to everything what is artificial and dealing with the idea of what we can do with new techniques and instruments where we can play with. Because without these emotions, without these kind of ways of testing these emotions, in the way how you play with creativity, I think you cannot do meaningful spaces, or cannot design meaningful projects. And not that I want to say I design meaningful projects, but I want to say that I want to stay close to the physical part of the work and the way how I do things with my hands, and how I can connect it also to the technological side. These two parts, I like to stretch them up even more. So the more I'm interested in technology and work on it, the more I learn now to be involved in doing my personal work.
Buyurun.
Hello, welcome again. I wanted to ask you, you said like you can make neighborhoods in the skyscrapers. That took my attention actually. As you know, the cities like New York, the dense cities, skyscrapers are not like, they're a must. But I wanted to know, like the neighborhoods that can be created in skyscrapers, can they be as effective as the ones on Earth? Like, is there a way that skyscrapers can be interoperable with human nature? Thank you.
Yeah, that's also a good question. Yes, my belief is yes, but it needs more time, because most of the skyscrapers what we have designed over the last century and more is that they have still a kind of monofunctional quality. I think they should be a little bit more mixed in their use. Also, in that what I said about user groups, that the combination of different user groups could be part of the skyscraper design. And what I mean by neighborhoods in the sky, we literally did this within several projects we designed in Singapore, where we introduced in smaller apartments, a combination of apartments who were small and less small, and in the differentiation of the clusters within the skyscraper, we introduced semi-public spaces like a clubhouse, because when we talked to the client and potential buyers, we asked them, what would you like to have for amenity spaces? And many things came up, like, yeah, if I have an apartment of only 40 square meters or 50 square meters, where do I give my birthday party when my family is around, my family is around 50 people? So where do I do that? And then we came to these ideas. Or the idea of a little cinema was introduced, or the idea of producing maybe a place where you can sport, or a cafe or restaurant somewhere in the building so that people could meet within these places. And really, honestly, the aspect of meeting someone where you sport with, or from somewhere in the building because you've seen them in the elevator, is already helping a bit to create that condition of building communities within a skyscraper. It helps. Yeah. But you have a second part.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to add something. I wanted to, pay attention to the point where, like, about the nature, like the interaction with nature.
Ah, nature. Yeah, that's a good one.
Like, for example, when it rains in Holland, for example, the smell of the earth, for example. Like, can you make a little utopia, yes, maybe, and the skyscrapers for the people, for example?
In Singapore, what is the most interesting law right now is that you cannot design a balcony for a resident apartment without having the maintenance area for green in there. So you need to have the water system connected towards it. It needs to be close to 80 centimeters deep part or area where this green could grow. So this is actually, to have already green on your balcony generates good air coming into your apartment. Looking at green makes you very much, makes you feel better. Is known through many researches what is done. It's not the same as a garden, of course, but it is something I think what will help definitely in a skyscraper design. Many skyscrapers lately have the tendency, even when it is a building for residents, who look like an office building, what I think is, crazy. I think we should really be careful that skyscrapers should not become all over office building like kind of buildings. They should really present the idea of, hey, I live there and that is my neighborhood, and even in the segmentation of a building, we can maybe emphasize that in one way or the other.
Let's get 2 more questions, one at the back and then one in the front. Okay? So you're going to have the last one.
Hi. So I want to ask you a question about balance.
Where are you?
Here.
Yes, hi.
Hi. So from the very beginning, we learn to work with a given context, like understanding the patterns, human patterns and the infrastructure and everything. But then every project comes with this need to make a change for the better, I think. So how do you balance that?
The need to change?
The need to make a change and the given.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
But don't you find, I find that the most exciting aspect of that, that nothing is repeating itself because you have a different location, you have a different culture you built in. Luckily enough, over the years we worked in 30 different countries. I like it that every person is different, where every client is different. I love that aspect of the profession, that you constantly are having these changes. I would go crazy if everything was the same. But I know what you mean. It is also important to also stimulate that change, even in the way how we design. I sometimes like it when someone in the team where we work with comes up with a total new idea of starting the project. It could be sometimes. We had once a few months ago. We had a fantastic discussion where we started only with colors. you know, at the beginning of the project it was all about colors. Actually, that came out of maybe some of my experiences while I was reading that book on the female artist I talked about. But anyway, so I like it to be part of the change, but I stimulate change also.
Okay, and the last question.
Hello, my name is Dilek. I will not be asking you something about buildings or constructions, but a product, actually a white paint, which has been recently developed by UN Studio, titled The Coolest White, I think. So it simply reduces, you know, the amount of heat that the buildings absorb. So how would you evaluate this great potential of architectural studios developing this kind of innovative environmental solutions to heal the human impact on Earth?
Well, thank you that you promote that project for me. That is actually, that's another exciting part of the profession, that if you become a little bit larger in company-wise, and that you then over the years can set up research departments like we do with knowledge platforms we have in the studio, and like I said, a future department, is that I like it that we are now also inventing these new products. This paint was not actually fully our own idea, but it was simply a company who said to us, you know, what would be now a great new idea for the way how we can reduce down the urban heat load in the built environment. And we did, you know, it was almost 4 years research in the laboratory where I myself was several part of over the years. It was really exciting to work on, and yeah, now it's a paint really what reduces. And we know this from white, you know, that's why buildings have been over, you know, in the history have been always white in warmer countries, but now this heat is totally reflected back almost for more than 90% towards the way how it is, or neutralized, I have to say, through this paint, and it's a real wonderful product. But don't forget, this is one product. We do so many other products, like we have now recently developed a new solar glass panel, what can be used on the facade instead of only on the roofs. So, and that is luckily enough on the market right now.
So, thank you very much, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sevgili konuklar, böylesine değerli bir grubu bugün burada ağırlamaktan büyük mutluluk duyduk. Yeni bir VitrA etkinliğinde görüşmek üzere. Katılımınız için çok teşekkür ederiz.